Zoltan Acs from George Mason University. Zoltan, what does the university have to do to reinvent itself in the digital age?
I think a good way to think about this is what the university did in the industrial age. And in the industrial age, the focus was on organizations, whether it was a university, whether it was the corporation, whether it was the government. And what we did was we made the organization superior and we made people subservient to the university. In an entrepreneurial society, you need to put the focus back on people. And the university somehow needs to allow people to again become the drivers of change in society. So in some sense, it's all about empowering people, because it's people that innovate, that become creative. And I think there's a tension going on in universities between those people that think they can better control this process and those that think we should let it go free.
I know you have a historical approach and you've studied the evolution of the 19th century industrial university, and you think that that can be a guide in the 21st century. What can we learn from the way in which the 19th century university evolved?
Well, I think it's interesting when you go back and look at the university traditionally, it was an elitist institution that was really set up to deal with the court, with educating lawyers and priests. The university was never about economic development or industry. And what happened in the United States is that there was this question of how do we make a university that can actually benefit economic development? How can we make the university, right, an engine of change? And if you go back to Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, they were already interested in this question. And the American college grew up as an institution that became the forerunner on how to change society. Now let me fast forward that just a bit. And what happened with these universities in America is that they became the frontier. See, when the physical frontier closed in America, people questioned whether America would still survive as America. And the frontier becomes sort of an intangible frontier, and it shifts to the university. Now, that doesn't get completely destroyed in the industrial age, but it gets subsumed. We push it down. And I think what we're seeing now again is the need to allow the university to become a place where we can actually, I hate to use the phrase invent the future, but that's exactly what we're looking at. And that can't be really done by bureaucrats administering. It needs to be done by allowing people, again, that freedom to change, to invent, and to create.
In Silicon Valley, people are inventing the future every day. Silicon Valley investors and entrepreneurs like Peter Thiel are actually paying people to stay out of university.
Well, I'm actually skeptical of the idea of keeping people out of universities. The university becomes a place where people actually experiment. It's where you meet people, it's where you make contacts, it's where you can try things out, you can fail at all sorts of things. And yes, people are doing some of this outside the university, but they're all doing it somehow, I think, networked to the university. It's not really completely independent. If the university disappeared from this, I think we would find ourselves in need of reinventing it somehow.
What are the most encouraging signs in your mind, actual examples of how the university is rebuilding itself as the frontier of 21st century life?
I don't know if it is.
But where can you be hopeful? Where are you seeing some optimistic shoots, some first blooms of this?
We started thinking about entrepreneurship and education 20, 25 years ago. And we have seen people slowly starting to rethink how we should allow this undergraduate experience to unfold. And I actually think where we need to look at this is not at graduate education, where a lot of the focus is on tech transfer and formal knowledge. A lot of this needs to focus on undergraduates. And so having universities that allow undergraduates to be creative, to follow their own leads. And you're seeing there are now a set of universities, Chicago's one, I think Emory's another, Maryland. They have been thinking about this for a while, and they're coming up with ways in which undergraduates across the university can interact and help facilitate this. So you get engineering students talking with business students talking with journalism students, students going across countries. So basically creating that networked effect of trying to figure out how do you invent the future. Because remember, what we're really talking about here is inventing the future. And the question is the university one of the institutions that's going to help us invent the future?
What do you think American universities can learn from what's happening in Europe, particularly in Holland, and what can Dutch universities learn from what's going on in the US?
That's a good question. I think there's two interesting issues, and I don't know what we learn from which side. One is the issue of scale. And I heard this morning about 3 times that they're going to look for economies of scale in Dutch universities. That means we're going to standardize the product, reduce cost, and make everybody the same. Because remember, that's what industrialization was all about, right? Making that Ford the same for everyone and making it as cheaply as possible. I actually think that's a huge mistake. You know, IRA magazine, there was an undergraduate at Brown University, and when he gave the valedictorian talk, his talk was that the university should get rid of all requirements. And at Brown University, they did. There are no requirements. If you want to go there as a freshman and take 6 courses in physics, your first semester, you can do it. It's not advised, but you can do it. So that's sort of an extreme of let the student decide which way he or she wants to go, what courses they want, as opposed to creating the standardization. So I think that's a bad lesson. The lesson from America, I think, that is interesting is that we are starting, I think, to focus on undergraduates more and more. And some of those attempts to figure out what we need to do to make the undergraduate experience more creative and more real. And I think that gets done at smaller universities with different social structures, different types of access. So in some sense, that idea of the American college as the undergraduate laboratory, I think is important and would be relevant for both the Dutch and the European experiment.